Fellow auto detailers, welcome to the show that features interviews with today's most successful auto detailers. This is the Auto Detailing Podcast. Here's your host, Jimbo Balaam.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 268 of the Auto Detailing Podcast. Excuse the voice, I'm dealing with some allergies after a little dry, windy spell here in crazy Southern California. Anyway, this week's episode, I was asked to sit down with actually someone I've known for a little while now, and it's cool because we met online and we kind of have this online relationship, but we always constantly check in with each other every once in a while. So he, in fact, had a school project that he needed to interview an entrepreneur. So he asked if I would come or actually let him interview me. It's just a quick, short interview, but every time I release these interviews and I share more about kind of my journey and my personal life in regards to detailing, you guys just eat it up and it quickly becomes one of the most downloaded episodes. So I wanted to give this episode to you guys. This is Daniel Eric Bowling interviewing me for his school project, which is kind of funny because considering the fact that I dislike school so much, it's actually the second time in the past month that I've been asked to be interviewed or speak in a school type setting. One was for a high school. This one happens to be for a college course, and though I'm not standing in front of the college, I still think it's pretty interesting that I find myself kind of being used as an example in school when I hated school so much. But that's not really the point. The point of this interview and the point of this podcast is to just let you guys behind the scenes a little bit more. I talk about some really interesting stuff that I've never talked about before anywhere. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode with me, talk about a couple of my past failures, a couple of my big successes, and kind of where I see this whole podcast being in 5 years. So I hope you enjoy this episode with me.
So I got Jimbo Balaam on here for my week 2 assignment, and Jimbo owns Jimbos Detailing. So Jimbo, can you tell us about what you do?
Sure. So Jimbos Detailing is a mobile auto detailing service. I'm a mobile detailer, so I detail clients' vehicles at their location. So whether that be their house, their office, whatever, I bring everything I need to detail their car properly right to people's locations.
So what has been your greatest success with your business so far?
I would say just launching the business in and of itself, because there's so many unknowns and so many factors that go into not only starting the business, but continuing to run it on a day-to-day basis that can overwhelm people. And I was thinking back, this is my 9th year doing it. But thinking back to when I started, it's May of 2008. The U.S. is in the middle of the worst economy since the Great Depression. Everyone's telling me, hey, this is the worst time possible that you could start a business. And so I had that, and then all the fears and worries about being a mobile detailer, and then having, factors out of my control like weather during the winter months. All those fears kind of creep in and can really disable you from even, or paralyze you really from even starting. So I would say the biggest success so far has just been starting.
Do you have a biggest failure that you can think of?
I hate the whole cliche answer to that of like, well, I fail forward and blah, blah, blah. I don't really consider any failures. Like, though I agree with that, I don't like how that's often phrased. But I think my greatest failure would be actually not related to detailing, but to a company that I tried to start that was kind of an offshoot of detailing, and I was doing a lot of odor removal in cars, like smoke odor, musky odor removal, and I saw an opportunity to do that, but in like houses, apartments, and condos, and so I tried to do that for a while, and then after about a year of really trying to hit it hard, I just decided to shut it down because I realized that I knew a lot about cars, and it was a lot easier to remove an odor out of a car than it was to go into this, house that someone has just purchased, and there's a funky smell, and you have no idea where that smell is coming from or what's causing it, and you're trying to go in and do that. I just realized that I was too far out of my depth in that, and so I kind of failed in that business never succeeded like I thought it was going to, and then kind of reverted back to just sticking with what I know, cars.
So you tried to abandon your niche to expand like everybody tells you to do?
I did, yes. And I've constantly, every year, I try to expand in a different way in my business, and most of the time it doesn't work out.
Yeah, we're learning about a concept of globalization and generation fluxers, and one of the reasons I picked you is because you're always trying to expand your business or try new things, if it would be the podcast or the courses that you're doing. So you're a great example of a generation fluxer.
And that's why I say I agree with, and cut me off wherever you need to. I know there's a time limit on this, but that's why I say I agree with like that failing forward concept, because you can always, no matter what you're doing, you can always take what you've learned from. Yes, but no, you can always take what you've learned from each and every failure onto the next journey. Because what worries me, my greatest fear, is that I get to the end of my life, and this has always been a fear of mine and has been a real motivator for me too. And now it's funny because it's becoming popular. But my greatest fear, before there was any terms wrapped around it or anything, was I didn't want to get to be 80 and then regret that I didn't at least try something. So I've kind of taken that into the business world. And I don't do it as well in my personal life, but at least in the business world, I would rather try just about anything to see if it works. Because for example, my first year, my first winter owning my own detailing business, I really wanted to start a tile and natural stone care business, and I didn't. And that was 8 years ago, and it still haunts me that I didn't put a little more effort into it to try to get it started. Learned from that early on and was like, okay, I'm never doing that again. So I'm willing to try anything.
I have another question for you. What about your
Sure.
What about your business has changed in the last 10 years?
A lot has changed in regards to a lot of state regulations as far as water runoff, chemicals that I can use, and kind of especially me being in California, and then within California being in Southern California, it's, I've really had to adapt and overcome some of these somewhat crippling regulations that have the potential of fines that can just wipe you out. A $25,000 fine that for a smaller operation like mine would just be devastating. So I've really had to kind of adapt, overcome, and skirt that line of regulations so that I can remain profitable and still deliver a good result to the client.
So it sounds like you're constantly adapting in a way that would affect your whole industry as well, especially in California.
Exactly. Yep. Definitely.
And then where do you see your business going in the next 5 years?
So I'm really in this interesting transitional phase that I've been trying to transition for the past 2.5 years. And that's from going from the day-to-day operations of physically doing detailing work to, I call it my online activities. So really transitioning to more of an online business, I guess, whether that be through training or, as you know, I have the auto detailing podcast. So bringing on guests and getting sponsorships and so much downtime not downtime, but I had so much time while I was out working on these cars that I needed to keep my mind occupied because I was just frankly getting bored of the monotony of detailing that it could become. So I got into podcasts, and then once I got into podcasting, this kind of whole world of location independence and not having to worry if it's going to rain or all these factors that are completely out of my control but can also be devastating to my business, that didn't exist in the online realm. So I found a little white space, being there was no podcast about auto detailing, and so I jumped on that, and I've been working ever since then. I've been working towards that goal of not physically working on cars so much, and instead of doing that, being a resource for people globally. I mean, speaking of your course, global, having a global audience and a global network of potential customers. So within the next 5 years, hopefully, fingers crossed, I will have fully developed or fully played that out to where I'm only doing cars because I want to and I like to, and not because I have to.
Well, I was going to ask you how you leverage technology, but it sounds like with the podcasting and everything, you're kind of doing that for the new direction of your business.
Yeah, well, and if you want to bring it into my physical detailing business, leveraging technology, one of the hardest things to do is to find new clients for people. And I gripe on guys all the time that listen to my podcast saying, look, you can be the greatest detailer in the world, but if you don't know how to get a client, you're not going to have a business. So I found Google AdWords, and completely, once I did that, I leveraged that to the hilt to find new clients for my physical detailing business. And it works. It's like a faucet. I can just turn it on and off depending on how busy or slow I am in my physical detailing business, which is, I don't think that works like that for every industry, but it does for mine. So I exploit it for all it's worth. But then what I did was I turned around and taught that and sell it as a course for detailers to learn some, tips and tricks on how they can leverage technology to help their physical business. So I've tried to cross that physical, or that barrier between physical and online, and kind of intertwine the two.
Just to tie it back to what we're learning, one of the things is the new jobs of the middle class moving forward, and one of them is to be a great leverager. I think that you're really great at leveraging everything you learn along the way and turning around and teaching other people and kind of building your new business around that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I try to leverage relationships as well, because my end game plan is to be an online-only entrepreneur, right? So I'm going to have to leverage the relationships that I've built in the physical, because I meet a lot of these people that I interview, but leverage those and kind of cross that into the online space and hopefully generate an income from that.
Oh, that's great. And then we were talking about globalization, and your line of work is traditionally more of a local business, but how has globalization really affected your business model?
Well, for the physical detailing business, not as much, other than the fact that I learn a lot from other people that I would never be able to learn from before, and I do a lot of that through the podcast. So a lot of, going back to what I talked about with like water regulations and staying efficient and profitable and effective with dealing with these regulations, there was a few relationships that I built through my podcast that really opened my eyes to some of these newer products that were coming out that would help me with runoff and keep me compliant with the regulations while maintaining, making the cars look great and all that. But I would have never really learned that without the internet, without, being able to reach out to these people through this platform that I had developed.
So effectively, it's a positive way. Globalization has really affected you as far as learning.
100%. 100%.
All right. Do you have any other businesses that you admire yourself, and why do you admire them?
Like industries, or like,
as broad as you want to take it.
Any business that has employees that is trying to stay cutting edge and doesn't, isn't afraid to try new stuff. So I really like, companies that are maybe like 10 to 100 employees that are just really killing it, mainly because I can do the CEO's cars. So And then I leveraged that relationship of doing their car to really try to pick their brain to see how they built this mini empire for themselves. So yeah, any industry that 10 to 100 employees is kind of fascinating to me.
I'll be honest, before I started with this class, I never paid attention to businesses, so it was hard for me to answer any that I actually admire, but then I started thinking about it, and they're usually ones that are more cloud-based. So I realized I used FreshBooks all the time, and that's my answer to that question is I really admire them. Great customer support, and they've just been all over helping me in my business. So I think cloud accounting and anything cloud for small business I really admire.
Yeah, I love the cloud. I'm like, love it.
Have you ever taken advantage of a transformational opportunity that has allowed you to reinvent your business? I know you talked about trying to at one point and it failed, but have you had any other examples of that?
I would say that really starting the podcast really it took me to a deeper level within the detailing industry that I would have never gotten to before. So I would say probably that in and of itself just really, I was trying all these other businesses that were kind of jumping ship from the detailing industry. And then I realized that, man, once I really took a deep dive into the industry that I love, I got better at it, so I guess once I kind of just honed in on what I was good at and naturally enjoyed, which I guess people would call a passion, that's really been the key for me. I don't know if that answered that question, but
yeah, I think that not even in a direct way that you can put your finger on, but I think in a very broad sense, it's really helped you grow your own business with what you've learned and the connections that you've made.
Exactly.
Now, moving forward, where do you see the podcast going?
I hope that the podcast is going to be a real leader, and not necessarily me, but the podcast in and of itself is going to be a real industry leader, combining technology from a learning standpoint and mix it with technology of product development and tool development and all this. And it's really going to be a thought leader, an industry standard show. We're a trusted resource that is a non-biased resource, which is something that I'm really focusing really heavy on, of not being a sellout, because that's happened a lot, where it's a trusted advisor, a trusted person, and then before you know it, it's they're working with company XYZ, and that's all they talk about. And then 6 months later, they quit company XYZ, and then they're bashing the company they worked with, and then saying how great this new company is. It's there's so much of that in my industry. It's I hope to never be that guy, and I hope that the Auto Detailing Podcast is never that kind of show where it's we're too biased to one particular brand or too loyal to one particular brand that we're not open to other brands. If someone else has a better product, I always say great, they have a better product. Awesome. What else do you want me to say? So I hope to keep it that way.
I think it's a great way to build your authority, and I think podcasting in general is a great way to generate traffic. Have you seen any actual income from podcasting? You can directly connect to it?
So the podcast itself has generated a little bit of income and continues to. And I have some pretty fun things in the works for 2017 that will hopefully significantly increase that. But also where it's helped me is from speaking with these other people and learning about new tips and tricks and products and stuff. I've implemented that into my physical business, which has made me faster at detailing a car or given me better results or opened up additional revenue streams. So it's maybe indirectly given me more income than I realized. But yeah, I try to monetize the podcast as a standalone show as much as possible, and then also incorporate what I'm learning there and implement it into my physical business. And has it landed me any physical jobs? Maybe. I don't think directly, but I think what it helps do is like show a potential customer that I'm a little bit different than the competition, and then I take it very serious, and then I am this thought leader, influencer, whatever term you want to throw on it, for the industry as a whole, so therefore I must be good. So maybe indirectly landed a few jobs from it.
Yeah, and I don't think your actual physical business employee or your customers in there is going to be listening to how to detail a car. That's why they hire you.
Exactly.
Before I let you go, what is do you have a life lesson that you'd like to share with people?
I love this quote, and it's kind of become my overarching quote for my whole life, and it will tie perfectly back to what we talked about or where I started. And it's attributed to Mark Twain, but I've seen a quote that says if you don't know who to attribute the quote to, attribute it to Abraham Lincoln or Mark Twain. So I don't really know if Mark Twain really said it, but it said the secret to getting ahead is to get started. So the secret to getting ahead is to get started. And that's a quote that I heard long before I started the podcast, and long before I started, any of these online activities. And everyone's always looking for that secret magic pill. How do I get ahead? How do I become the thought leader? How do I win over this space? And it's so often life just comes back to that quote being so applicable. Just the key to getting ahead, or the secret to getting ahead, is just to get started.
I think it's
just start.
Tie it back into your biggest success is launching.
Exactly. Just get started, because you never know the opportunity that's going to come through just starting.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that interview with me and Daniel Eric Bowling. If you haven't heard on the previous episode, you can head on over to autodetailingpodcast.com/start, which is pretty timely for the things talked about in this week's episode. And I have some new courses out for you. For additional resources, just autodetailingpodcast.com/resources. And always, I love to hear your guys' feedback. So reach out to me on Facebook. It's probably the easiest way, facebook.com/autodetailingpodcast. Write me a message. And of course, I will have all those links for you in the show notes below. And I will see you guys on next week's episode.